Here we go. Good morning. So last night was our final of 4-week study on David's life, and I wanted to give you just a simple synopsis. David is earning wisdom. Solomon, his son, was given wisdom, but David is earning it the hard way. Running from Saul, asking God what to do. David's fighting with the Philistines. Now David's fighting with Israel. And there's a couple chapters that are back to back where in chapter 24, David has the opportunity to kill Saul, and he doesn't. He cuts off a piece of his robe, feels bad about that because it is an assault on Saul's kingship. The next chapter, say David doesn't restrain himself. Abigail has to restrain him because in that chapter, David wants to kill Nabal, this ridiculous guy, and he should. I mean, Nabal deserves it. At the end of the chapter, God kills Nabal. So then when God strikes Nabal, the next chapter, David has another chance at Saul. But instead of killing him, David says, no, God will strike Saul if it's his time, but I'm not going to step in there. So he just puts up with the mess and all the fallout that happens from Saul remaining in this world as king. And he says strike because David has learned in his life, first time he restrained himself, second time God did the killing that was needed, and David said, that's what I trust. And it's like David is learning who he's trusting and what he's trusting in God. And at the end of his life, at the end of 2 Samuel, which we didn't get there, but I did zoom ahead. At the end of 2 Samuel, you see David make mistakes. He's an old man, and he says he can't even warm himself, and he calls for a census to be made, which is a sin. It's an offense against God to measure your army, because it doesn't matter how big your army is. All that matters is that God's your God. But David does in a moment of weakness. So God judges him and gives him two options. I could send a 7-year famine or a 3-year pestilence or something like that. And David's response is tremendous. He says, God, take me. I'll sacrifice myself. And God's anger does it is expressed, his wrath expressed against Israel, but God does cut it short because of David. And David's appeal, saying, I have learned who you are, and I cast myself upon your mercies. Appealing to God, person to person, after his lifelong of learning and struggling with who God is. That's where the narrative ends, is David recognizing God's kingship, recognizing his wrath, and just begging for mercy because of his understanding of God's loving kindness and loving and mercies. And it adds a whole new level of context to Psalm 23, where David says, surely your goodness and mercy shall hound me down the rest of my life. If you look at David and Saul blew it, God judged him, rightfully so, he's out. David blew it over and over and over again, and yet God gives him grace. And that's David's life story to us. God's goodness and mercy, it sniffed him out. It pursued him all the way to the end of his life through any sin, through any problem, because God had chosen him. He was the man that God had chosen. And that's the story of David in 3.5 minutes. So hope you guys have a great week, and we will look at doing another character study or book study here pretty quick.